Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the narrow maintenance tunnel of the cargo ship New Horizon. The smell of burning circuits filled his nose, and he knew they were in serious trouble. He had been working as an engineer on this old freight hauler for 3 years now, and had never seen the systems fail this badly before. The ship carried basic supplies to outer colonies in human space. It was not glamorous work, but Jake enjoyed fixing things and keeping the ancient vessel running. Most people thought he was crazy for choosing this job when he could have worked on the newer military ships or luxury liners. But Jake liked the peace and quiet of deep space travel. Captain Rodriguez called down to him through the comm system. His voice sounded worried. "Jake, how bad is it down there?" Jake looked at the melted control panel in front of him. Sparks still flew from several broken connections. "Pretty bad, Captain. The main drive is completely fried. We also lost our navigation computer and half the life support systems. Can you fix it?" Jake sighed and shook his head, even though the captain could not see him. "Not with what we have on board. We need parts and a proper repair dock. This ship is not going anywhere for a while." The silence that followed told Jake everything he needed to know. They were in the middle of nowhere between star systems. The nearest human outpost was weeks away even at full speed. With their engines dead, they might as well be floating in a bottle in the ocean. "There is something else, Captain," Jake said, as he checked his readings again. "I am picking up energy signatures from a planet nearby. Looks like there might be a civilization down there." Captain Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "What kind of civilization?" "Unknown, sir. The readings are strange, not like anything in our databases, but they definitely have advanced technology." Jake climbed out of the maintenance tunnel and made his way to the bridge. The rest of the crew looked worried as they stared at the dead control panels. There were only 6 people on board, including Jake, and they all knew their situation was desperate. The planet appeared on their view screen as a blue and green world with strange crystal formations visible from orbit. The energy readings were stronger now, and Jake could see what looked like cities made of living lights scattered across the surface. "We have no choice," Captain Rodriguez said finally. "We need help, and that planet is our only option. Prepare the shuttle, Jake. You and Martinez will go down and try to make contact." Jake felt his stomach tighten. He was just an engineer, not a diplomat. But someone had to try, and the shuttle was the only thing still working on their ship. He gathered his tools and some basic supplies while Martinez prepared the shuttle for launch. The journey down to the planet's surface was bumpy. The strange energy fields in the atmosphere interfered with their instruments. Jake had to rely on manual controls to guide them to what looked like a landing area near one of the crystal cities. As they touched down, Jake got his first look at the aliens who lived here. They were tall beings made of what appeared to be living crystal. Their bodies glowed with internal light, and they moved with a grace that seemed almost supernatural. Dozens of them surrounded the shuttle as Jake and Martinez stepped outside. The aliens did not speak in any language Jake recognized. Instead, they communicated through changes in the color and intensity of their light. Jake tried using hand gestures and his universal translator, but nothing seemed to work. One of the taller aliens approached them. Its crystalline form pulsed, with deep blue light as it examined the 2 humans. Jake felt like he was being scanned or judged somehow. The alien made a sound like wind chimes in a storm, and suddenly Jake found himself surrounded by more of the crystal beings. They were not hostile, but they were definitely not friendly either. Jake and Martinez were led away from their shuttle toward the crystal city. Jake tried to explain that they needed help with their ship, but the aliens showed no interest in his words. The city was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. Buildings grew from the ground like living trees made of light and crystal. There were no roads or vehicles that he could recognize. The aliens simply floated through the air or walked through walls as if they were made of water. Jake was brought before what seemed to be some kind of leader. This alien was larger than the others, and its light was so bright it hurt to look at directly. When it spoke, the sound echoed through Jake's bones. Human, it said in perfect English that seemed to come from everywhere at once. You are far from your territory. Why have you come to Cathera Prime? Jake swallowed hard and tried to keep his voice steady. Our ship is broken. We need help to repair it so we can return home. We mean no harm to you or your people. The alien leader pulsed with what Jake thought might be amusement. Harm. You could not harm us even if you tried, little organic. You will work in the quantum mines until your usefulness ends. Your ship will be destroyed. Before Jake could protest, he felt something wrap around his mind like invisible chains. His free will seemed to slip away as the alien leader continued to glow with cold light. Jake realized with growing horror that he had just become a slave to an empire he never knew existed. Jake woke up in a dark cave that smelled of strange chemicals and burning rock. His head pounded and his whole body ached like he had been hit by a transport ship. He tried to remember what happened, but his memories felt fuzzy and distant. The mental control the alien leader had placed on him was still there, but it felt weaker now. Jake could think his own thoughts again, even though he felt compelled to obey orders. Around him, dozens of other beings worked in the dim light, pulling glowing crystals from the cave walls. Most of the workers were species Jake had never seen before. There were tall, blue-skinned beings with 4 arms and short, hairy creatures that looked like walking carpets. All of them moved with the same defeated shuffle that Jake recognized from his own body. "New meat," said a voice behind him. Jake turned to see a human woman about his age with short, dark hair and tired eyes. "Name is Beth Collins. Been here 2 years now. Welcome to hell." Jake tried to speak but found his throat was dry and raw. Beth handed him a cup of bitter-tasting water. "The mind control makes you sick at first. Gets easier after a while. Well, not easier, but you get used to it." "What is this place?" Jake managed to croak out. "Quantum mining facility," Beth said as she picked up a heavy tool and started chipping at the cave wall. "The crystal beings are called Kithari. They use these quantum crystals to power their ships and cities. We dig them out of the ground until we die." Jake looked around at the other workers with growing horror. He could see now that many of them were sick or injured. Some had missing limbs or deep scars from mining accidents. "How many humans are here?" "Just us 2 now. There were 6 when I got here, but the others did not last long. The work is hard, and the Kithari do not care if we live or die." A new voice spoke from behind them. That is not entirely true. Jake and Beth turned to see one of the crystal beings approaching them. This one was smaller than the others Jake had seen, and its light was softer somehow. Where the other Kithari glowed with cold blue or white light, this one pulsed with warm yellow and green colors. "You can understand us," Jake said in surprise. "I have been studying organic languages for some time. My name is Zara. I am assigned to oversee this mining section," Beth snorted. Another slave driver. Just what we needed, but Jake noticed something different about this Kithari. Where the others moved with arrogant confidence, Zara seemed almost nervous. Her light flickered in patterns that reminded Jake of someone who was uncertain or afraid. "I am not like the others," Zara said quietly. "I do not believe organic beings are worthless as my people teach. But I must be careful. Such thoughts are considered defective among the Kithari." Over the following days, Jake learned more about his new prison. The Kithari Empire controlled hundreds of worlds across this part of the galaxy. They had conquered most of the organic species centuries ago and used them as slave labor. The quantum crystals they mined here powered everything in Kithari society. Jake also learned that his engineering skills were valuable even in this hellish place. The mining equipment was poorly maintained and often broke down. When a cave-in trapped several workers, Jake was able to jury-rig a rescue system using spare parts and his knowledge of structural engineering. Zara watched him work with growing interest. "How did you know to do that?" she asked after Jake had saved the trapped miners. Basic engineering principles, Jake said as he cleaned the dirt from his hands. You identify the problem, then find the simplest solution using available resources. The Cathari way would be to seal the tunnel and dig a new one. The trapped workers would be acceptable losses. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. Those are people, not acceptable losses. Every life has value. Zara's light pulsed with colors Jake had never seen before. You truly believe that? Even about beings you have never met before? Of course. Why would it matter what species someone is? This conversation marked the beginning of something neither Jake nor Zara had expected. Over the weeks that followed, they continued to talk during rest periods. Jake told Zara about human concepts like individual worth and cooperation between different groups. Zara shared her knowledge of Cathari technology and society. Jake learned that the Cathari had a rigid caste system based on the color and intensity of their light. Zara was considered low-ranking because her light was warm instead of cold. She had been assigned to oversee organic workers as punishment for asking too many questions about Cathari society. But Jake also discovered that his ideas were spreading among the workers. Beth started translating his words into other languages so all the slaves could understand. The concept that they deserved better treatment began to take root in minds that had known only despair for years. The Cathari had made a mistake when they assumed that broken spirits could never be rebuilt. Jake showed the other workers that they were more than just tools to be used and discarded. He taught them to help each other and share what little they had. When an old Vorthak worker named Grix collapsed from exhaustion, Jake organized the others to cover his work quota. When a young Talani female was injured in an accident, Jake showed the group how to make medical supplies from materials they found in the caves. Zara watched these acts of kindness with growing wonder. In Cathari society, the weak were abandoned, and the strong took what they wanted. The idea that beings would help each other without expecting anything in return was completely foreign to her. "Why do you do this?" she asked Jake one day, as he shared his food ration with a sick worker. "Because it is the right thing to do," Jake said simply. Zara's light flickered with confusion. "Right according to whom? The strong should take from the weak. That is the natural order." Jake looked up at the crystal being who had become his unlikely friend. "Maybe on your world, but humans learned long ago that we are stronger when we work together, when we take care of each other instead of fighting over scraps." That night, Zara did something she had never done before. She used her access codes to bring extra food and medical supplies to the workers. It was a small act of rebellion, but it felt like the most important thing she had ever done. Jake smiled when he saw the supplies. "See? You understand after all." Zara's light pulsed with new colors as she realized that everything she had been taught about organic inferiority might be wrong. The trouble started when Overseer Krex arrived for his monthly inspection. Krex was one of the high-ranking Cathari with light so bright it cast shadows even in the crystal-lit caves. His crystalline form towered over the organic workers as he examined their progress with cold calculation. Jake had been working in the mines for 3 months now and had seen Krex twice before. Each visit ended with punishments for workers who were not meeting their quotas. This time the overseer seemed particularly displeased with what he found. Old Grix, the Vorthak worker, had been getting sicker over the past weeks, despite Jake and the others trying to help him. His forearms shook with weakness as he tried to lift the heavy mining tools. His normally blue skin had turned a pale gray color that Jake knew meant serious illness among his species. Krex stood in front of Grix and examined the small pile of quantum crystals the old worker had managed to extract. "Unacceptable," the overseer said in his voice like breaking glass. "This unit has become defective. It must be disposed of." Jake felt ice form in his stomach as he realized what Krex meant. Around the cave, other workers stopped what they were doing to watch. They had all seen executions before, but somehow this felt different. Grix had become a symbol of hope for the others because Jake had shown them his life had value. "Wait," Jake said before he could stop himself. "He is just sick. Give him time to recover and he will work better." Krex turned his burning gaze toward Jake. "Organic units do not give orders to Cathari. Return to your work or join this defective unit in disposal." But Jake found he could not return to work. Everything he had learned about standing up for others and protecting the weak made it impossible for him to just watch Grix die. "I will take his place," Jake said quietly. The silence that followed felt like the whole cave was holding its breath. Krex pulsed with what Jake had learned was amusement among the Cathari. "You would sacrifice yourself for this worthless creature." "He is not worthless. His name is Grix, and he has worked here longer than anyone else. He deserves better than this." Jake could see Zara watching from the tunnel entrance. Her light was flickering rapidly, and patterns he had learned meant extreme distress. She wanted to help, but could not interfere without revealing her own rebellious thoughts. Krex moved closer to Jake until the heat from his crystalline body was almost unbearable. "Interesting. The organic shows defiance. Perhaps a demonstration is needed to remind the others of their place." What happened next surprised everyone, including Jake himself. Instead of backing down, he stepped forward so he was directly in front of the overseer. "You want to kill someone? Kill me, but leave the others alone." The effect on the other workers was immediate. Jake could see them standing straighter and looking at Krex with something other than fear for the first time in years. Beth moved to stand beside Jake, and then Grix himself struggled to his feet despite his illness. "We stand together," Beth said in a voice that carried clearly through the cave. One by one, the other workers joined them. Species that had been enemies before their enslavement now stood side by side facing down their oppressor. The Talani female, Jake had helped when she was injured. The hairy Korgan males who rarely spoke to anyone outside their own kind. Even the peaceful Valdris who normally avoided all conflict. Krex found himself facing not scattered individuals, but a unified group. For the first time in his centuries of overseeing organic workers, his light pulsed with confusion and then growing anger. "You will all be destroyed for this defiance." But before he could act, Jake spoke again. "Zara, what do the Cathari laws say about worker productivity?" Zara understood immediately what Jake was doing. Cathari Regulation 743 states that productive units should not be destroyed without efficiency review by higher authority. Krex spun toward Zara with rage, building in his crystalline core. "You dare quote regulations to a superior overseer." "I quote facts," Zara said with more courage than she had ever shown before. "These workers have increased quantum crystal extraction by 30% over the past month. Destroying them would violate efficiency protocols." It was true. Jake had taught the workers to coordinate their efforts and share techniques. Instead of competing against each other, they now worked as teams. The result was more crystals extracted, with fewer injuries and less equipment damage. Krex was trapped by his own society's obsession with efficiency. He could not argue with the numbers Zara presented, but he could not allow open defiance to go unpunished either. His light flickered, with indecision for long moments. Finally, he made his choice. "This facility will be monitored more closely. Any decline in productivity will result in immediate disposal of all units." After Krex left, the cave erupted in quiet celebration. The workers could not believe they had faced down a high-ranking Cathari and survived. But Jake knew this was only the beginning. Over the following weeks, word of what happened in their mine spread through the underground networks that connected enslaved populations across Cathari space. The story grew in the telling until Jake became almost a mythical figure, the human who stood up to a crystal lord and lived to tell about it. But Jake was more interested in practical results than mythology. He worked with Zara to study the Cathari, computer systems that controlled the mining operation. His engineering background helped him understand weaknesses in their security that the overconfident Cathari had never considered. Meanwhile, he continued teaching the workers about cooperation and planning. They learned to coordinate not just their work, but their rest periods and food distribution. They developed simple codes to communicate information without the overseer's understanding. Most importantly, Jake taught them that they deserved better than slavery. The idea spread like a virus through the worker populations. Species that had accepted their fate for generations began to remember what freedom felt like. The next crisis came when Overseer Krex returned with additional guards and new equipment designed to increase productivity. He had obviously reported the efficiency improvements to his superiors and been ordered to push the workers even harder. Jake knew that the increased quotas would kill workers who were already pushed to their limits. When Krex announced that work shifts would be extended by 4 hours and food rations would be reduced, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He walked to the center of the main cavern where all the workers could see him. "We will not accept these new conditions," he said in a voice that carried clearly through the tunnels. Krex blazed with fury. "You forget your place, organic. Obey or be destroyed." Jake looked around at all the faces watching him, human and alien workers, who had become his friends and family over these hard months. "We are not organics or units or things to be used up and thrown away. We are people, and we deserve to be treated with respect." What followed was not a chaotic uprising, but an organized work stoppage. The workers simply stopped mining and sat down where they were. They did not attack anyone or destroy equipment. They just refused to work under the new conditions. Krex found himself facing something the Cathari Empire had never encountered before: organized passive resistance from supposedly inferior beings who acted with discipline and purpose, rather than blind rage. The spark of revolution had been lit, and it would soon spread far beyond one small mining facility on a forgotten world. News of the mining facility rebellion spread through Cathari space faster than anyone expected. Within days, similar uprisings began on factory worlds, agricultural colonies, and shipbuilding stations across the Empire. But these were not random acts of violence. Each rebellion followed the same pattern Jake had established on Cathera Prime. The workers would organize peacefully and present reasonable demands for better treatment. When refused, they would stop working, but would not attack their overseers or destroy property. Most importantly, they showed mercy to any Cathari who surrendered and tried to convince others to join them, rather than simply destroying everything they hated. Jake found himself in the strange position of being a leader he never wanted to become. Representatives from dozens of species looked to him for guidance on everything from military tactics to government structure. The responsibility weighed heavily on him, but he tried to remember the principles that had gotten them this far. The biggest test came when the rebellion captured Nexus Prime Valdris, the regional governor who had first ordered Jake enslaved. Many of the liberated workers wanted immediate revenge for centuries of oppression. Jake understood their anger, but knew that giving in to it would make them no better than their former masters. Instead, he arranged for Valdris to tour the liberated facilities and see how organic beings behaved when treated with respect. The Cathari governor was shocked to discover that freed workers were actually more productive than slaves. They innovated solutions to problems, developed new techniques, and worked together in ways the rigid Cathari hierarchy could never achieve. "This is impossible," Valdris said as he watched a mixed team of humans, Vorthax, and Talani redesigning a quantum extraction system. "Organics cannot cooperate across species lines. Your primitive minds are too chaotic." Jake smiled as he stood beside the crystalline governor. "That is what you were taught to believe, but look around you. When people are treated as equals instead of property, they can accomplish amazing things." The evidence was hard to ignore. The liberated worlds were not descending into chaos, as Kithari propaganda predicted. Instead, they were becoming more organized and efficient than they had ever been under Imperial rule. Crime rates dropped to almost nothing when everyone had enough food and meaningful work. Interspecies conflicts disappeared when groups had shared goals instead of competition for scarce resources. Meanwhile, Zara had become a crucial bridge between the rebellion and sympathetic Kithari. Her warm light and gentle manner convinced other progressive members of her species that change was not only possible, but necessary. A growing number of Kithari began to defect, bringing with them vital intelligence about Imperial military plans and weaknesses. The rebellion's greatest military victory came during the Battle of Helix Station. This massive space platform controlled the hyperspace routes that connected the outer colonies to the Kithari core worlds. Capturing it would effectively cut off Imperial reinforcements to the rebellious sectors. Jake had never commanded a space battle before, but he applied the same principles that had worked in the mines. Instead of attacking with overwhelming force, he used coordination and superior intelligence to outmaneuver the enemy. The rebellion fleet consisted of captured freighters and hastily converted civilian ships, but they fought with a unity the Kithari had never encountered. The Imperial commander, Admiral Nexus Prime Corvin, had expected to crush the organic rabble with his fleet of advanced crystal ships. But Jake's forces used unconventional tactics that exploited weaknesses in Kithari military doctrine. They attacked from multiple directions, shared information instantly across all ships, and adapted their strategies in real time as conditions changed. Most importantly, they fought for something greater than themselves. Each pilot and gunner knew they were fighting not just for their own freedom, but for the liberation of billions of enslaved beings across the galaxy. That kind of motivation gave them an edge no amount of superior technology could overcome. When Admiral Corvin's flagship was disabled and boarded, Jake made a decision that shocked everyone on both sides. Instead of executing the captured admiral, he offered him a choice. Corvin could return to the Kithari core worlds with a message of peace, or he could stay and see how the rebellion really operated. "You would trust me to carry your words to my superiors?" Corvin asked in disbelief. "I would trust you to see the truth," Jake replied. "Your empire teaches that organics are chaotic and violent, but you have seen today that we can be disciplined and merciful. Take that knowledge back to your people." Admiral Corvin chose to stay and observe the rebellion for several weeks. What he saw gradually changed his understanding of everything he had believed about organic life. The former slaves did not abuse their newfound power or seek random revenge. Instead, they worked tirelessly to build something better than what had existed before. The captured Kithari personnel were treated with the same respect shown to any other species. They were given meaningful work and included in decision-making processes. Some chose to return home when given the chance, but others decided to remain and contribute to the growing confederation. Jake insisted that all major decisions be made by representatives from every species rather than by any single leader. This democratic approach was completely foreign to Kithari thinking, but it produced results that impressed even the most skeptical observers. The rebellion also faced internal challenges as different groups had different ideas about what their new society should look like. Some wanted to establish their own empires and rule over the Kithari as they had been ruled. Others pushed for complete pacifism that would leave them vulnerable to reconquest. Jake spent countless hours mediating between factions and helping them find common ground. His greatest skill turned out to be listening to different viewpoints and finding solutions that everyone could accept. He taught the former slaves that democracy required compromise and patience rather than the immediate satisfaction they craved after centuries of oppression. The breakthrough came when they established the Galactic Confederation Charter. This document outlined principles of equality, cooperation, and mutual respect that would govern their new society. Every species contributed ideas, and every representative had an equal voice in the drafting process. But even as the rebellion celebrated its political and military victories, Jake knew their greatest challenges still lay ahead. The Cathari Empire would not simply accept the loss of their slave worlds. Intelligence reports suggested the Imperial Corps was preparing for a massive counterattack using weapons that could destroy entire planets. Jake looked out at the mixed fleet of ships flying together under the new Confederation flag. Humans worked, alongside Vorthax, who cooperated with Talani, who shared duties with reformed Kithari. It was everything he had dreamed of when he first stood up to Overseer Krex in that dark mining cave, but he also knew that dreams alone would not be enough to face what was coming. The real test of their new confederation would be whether they could remain true to their principles when faced with an enemy willing to commit genocide rather than accept change. The tide had turned, but the final battle for the galaxy's future was still ahead. The first planet died at dawn. Jake watched helplessly from the bridge of the Confederation flagship as Talani Prime was consumed by unimaginable fire. The ancient Cathari doomsday weapon turned the entire world into a burning star in less than 60 seconds. 3 billion innocent beings were vaporized in an instant. Jake felt his knees give out as the magnitude of what he was seeing hit him. Those were not just numbers on a screen, but real people with families and dreams and hopes for the future. Children who would never grow up. Parents who died trying to protect their young, all because he had dared to teach slaves they deserved better treatment. "Sir, we are receiving similar reports from Vorthax Central and New Korgan," reported Commander Hayes, the human communications officer. Both planets were destroyed within minutes of each other. 3 worlds. 3 civilizations wiped from existence because the Cathari Empire preferred genocide to losing control of their slaves. Jake had known the enemy was ruthless, but this level of destruction was beyond anything he had imagined possible. Around him, the bridge crew worked in stunned silence. These were hardened veterans who had fought their way to freedom through countless battles, but none of them had been prepared for this. How do you fight an enemy willing to destroy everything rather than accept defeat? Zara approached Jake slowly. Her crystalline form dimmed with grief. "My people have activated weapons that were forbidden even during our ancient wars. They would rather see the galaxy burn than admit they were wrong about organic life." Jake stared at the empty space where Talani Prime had been just minutes before. How many more worlds do they have the power to destroy? Intelligence suggests they have at least 12 more planet-killer weapons scattered throughout the core worlds. Each one can eliminate an entire star system. The weight of responsibility. For billions of deaths threatened to crush Jake completely. Around the Confederation fleet, ships were requesting orders. Some captains wanted to retreat to the outer rim and hide. Others demanded immediate retaliation against Kithari civilian targets. A few suggested surrendering to prevent more planet killings. But it was Beth Collins who reminded Jake of his own teachings. The former mining slave had become one of his closest advisors, and she understood better than anyone what this moment meant. "Jake," she said quietly, "remember what you told us in the caves? The goal was never to replace one tyranny with another. It was to build something better." Jake looked at his old friend and saw the same determination that had kept her alive through years of slavery. "They murdered billions of innocents, Beth. How can we not respond with equal force? Because that would make us exactly what they always said we were. Violent, chaotic beings who destroy everything we touch. The moment we start targeting their civilians, we prove their propaganda was right all along." Jake knew she was correct, but the desire for revenge burned in his chest like acid. Every instinct told him to strike back with everything they had. To show the Kithari that organic life could be just as ruthless as they were. Instead, he called an emergency session of the Confederation Council. Representatives from every member species gathered virtually to discuss their response to the planet killings. The debate was fierce, with many calling for immediate retaliation. "They have shown us no mercy," declared General Thane, the Vorthak military commander. Why should we show them any? Because mercy is what separates us from them, Jake replied. The moment we start killing innocents, we become the monsters they always claimed we were. But even Jake's supporters struggled with his position. How could they ask people to turn the other cheek after watching their homeworlds burn? What parent could forgive the murder of their children? What survivor could accept that their dead friends died for nothing? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Admiral Corvin, the former Kithari commander who had chosen to stay with the rebellion, stood up to address the council. "I have spent months among you learning about your ways," he said in his crystalline voice. "What I have seen proves that everything my people believe about organic life is wrong. You are not chaotic or violent by nature. You are capable of great compassion and wisdom." Corvin paused as his light pulsed with colors Jake had learned meant deep emotion among the Kithari. "But if you respond to this atrocity with more atrocities, you will validate every prejudice my people hold. You will prove that organics are indeed savage beasts who must be controlled or destroyed." The Admiral's words carried special weight because he was speaking against his own species. Other reformed Kithari in the Confederation added their voices to his. They explained how planet killings were being justified to the Kithari population as necessary defense against organic aggression. Jake realized they were fighting a war for hearts and minds as much as territory. Every action the Confederation took would be used as propaganda, either to justify more Kithari atrocities or to prove that change was possible. Working with captured Kithari scientists and engineers, Jake's technical teams began developing countermeasures to the planet-killer weapons. It was incredibly complex work, requiring deep understanding of quantum physics and crystalline technology that humans had never encountered before. But Jake's greatest weapon turned out to be captured communication networks. The rebellion began broadcasting the truth about the planet killings throughout Kithari space. They showed footage of the peaceful, liberated worlds and compared them to the burning wreckage the Empire had created. Many loyal Kithari were horrified to learn what their leaders had done in their name. The official propaganda claimed the destroyed worlds were military targets full of savage organic armies. The reality was farming colonies and civilian centers with no military value whatsoever. Protests began on Kithari worlds as citizens demanded explanations from their government. Some refused to support further planet killings, while others joined underground networks helping organic refugees escape to Confederation space. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. They declared martial law throughout the core worlds and began arresting any Kithari who questioned official policy. This only increased opposition as families were torn apart and friends disappeared into government detention centers. Jake watched these developments with mixed feelings. He was glad to see Kithari civilians rejecting their government's genocide, but he knew the growing unrest would probably lead to more desperate actions by the Imperial leadership. The next crisis came when intelligence reports revealed the Empire was preparing to deploy all remaining planet killers simultaneously. Rather than face gradual defeat, they planned to eliminate every liberated world at once and blame the Confederation for forcing their hand. Jake stared at the tactical display showing 12 red dots marking the doomsday weapons. Each one represented the potential death of billions of innocent beings. The weight of so many lives hung on decisions he would make in the next few hours. "We have one chance," he told the assembled fleet commanders. "We can stop them, but only if we move fast and work together perfectly. No mistakes, no hesitation, no second chances." Jake outlined a desperate plan that required every ship in the Confederation fleet to attack simultaneously across multiple star systems. They would have to disable the planet killers before they could be fired while fighting through heavy Imperial defenses. But even if they succeeded, Jake knew the real battle was just beginning. The physical war might end, but the harder task of building a lasting peace would take generations. He could only hope the principles they had fought for would survive whatever came next. The final battle was fought not with weapons, but with words. Jake stood in the great crystal amphitheater at the heart of Kristallos, the Cathari homeworld, facing the assembled council of shards. The ancient chamber had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, but had never hosted anything like this moment. Beside Jake stood representatives from every species in the Confederation. Zara's warm light provided a stark contrast to the cold brilliance of the council members. Admiral Corvin had chosen to stand with the delegation, despite knowing it marked him as a traitor in the eyes of his own people. The desperate attack on the planet-killer weapons had succeeded, but just barely. Jake's forces had managed to disable 11 of the 12 doomsday devices before they could fire. The last weapon had been destroyed by a Cathari defector who sacrificed his own ship to save the colony world of New Haven. But military victory was not enough. The galaxy was tired of war, and the Confederation needed a lasting peace. That could only come through negotiation and compromise rather than conquest and occupation. High Nexus Prime. Zareth, the leader of the Council of Shards, blazed with fury as he looked down at the organic delegation. You dare bring your primitive demands into the sacred chamber of our ancestors. The Cathari have ruled this galaxy for 10,000 years. We will not bow to the chaos you represent. Jake had prepared for this moment through months of study and reflection. He understood now that the Cathari were not evil by nature, but trapped by a culture that had forgotten how to change. Their rigid hierarchy and obsession with control came from deep fear of the unknown. We are not here to make demands, Jake said, in a voice that carried clearly through the chamber. We come to offer partnership. The galaxy is big enough for all of us to prosper together. The proposal Jake presented was revolutionary by galactic standards. Instead of conquest or occupation, the Confederation offered to create a new galactic council where every species would have equal representation. The Cathari could keep their worlds and their culture, but they would have to give up their empire and join the larger community of free peoples. Impossible, declared Council Member Vex. Organics cannot govern themselves. Without Cathari guidance, they descend into chaos and warfare. Admiral Corvin stepped forward to respond. Honored Council, I have spent a year living among these organics. What I have seen contradicts everything we have been taught. They are capable of great wisdom and cooperation when treated as equals rather than slaves. The debate that followed lasted for 3 days. Jake and his team patiently answered every objection and addressed every concern. They provided evidence of successful cooperation between species on liberated worlds. They showed economic data proving that free workers were more productive than slaves. They demonstrated technologies developed through cross-species collaboration that surpassed anything the Cathari had achieved alone. But the real breakthrough came when Zara addressed the council in the ancient formal language of her people. She spoke of honor and duty and the responsibility that came with power. She reminded the council members of their own teachings about the importance of wisdom and growth. Our ancestors conquered this galaxy because they were willing to adapt and change, Zara said as her light pulsed with authority. We became stagnant and rigid, thinking our power made us immune to the consequences of our actions. The organic rebellion has shown us that we were wrong. Some council members remained unconvinced. They activated security protocols and tried to have the delegation arrested. But they discovered that their own people would no longer blindly follow orders. Cathari citizens across the homeworld had risen up demanding an end to the genocidal policies of their government. The final moment came when High Nexus Prime Zareth himself faced a choice. He could order the use of the last remaining planet killer weapon against Kristallos itself, destroying his own people rather than accepting change. Or he could take the unprecedented step of admitting that the Cathari way was not the only way. Jake watched the ancient leader struggle with concepts that challenged everything he had believed for centuries. The crystalline being flickered between different colors as internal conflicts raged within his consciousness. "You offer us equality with beings we have always considered inferior," Zareth said finally. "Why should we trust that you will not seek revenge for our past actions?" Jake thought of all the friends he had lost and all the worlds that had been destroyed. The desire for revenge still burned in his heart, but he had learned that some prices were too high to pay. "Because revenge only creates more suffering," Jake replied. "We have all lost too much already. The only way forward is together." The vote that followed was closer than anyone expected. Half the council members remained convinced that the Cathari should fight to the end rather than compromise their ancient supremacy. But the other half had been swayed by evidence that change was not only possible, but necessary for survival. High, Nexus Prime. Zareth cast the deciding vote. His light dimmed to almost nothing as he spoke the words that would end the Cathari Empire forever. "The Council accepts the Confederation proposal. We will join this new galactic community as equals among equals." The reaction across Cathari space was immediate and dramatic. Some worlds celebrated the end of warfare and the beginning of a new era. Others erupted in riots as hardline factions refused to accept the Council's decision. It would take years to fully implement the changes, but the foundation had been laid. Jake found himself appointed as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Council. It was not a position he wanted, but he accepted it as his responsibility to help build the peace he had fought for. The early years were difficult as old prejudices, and new freedoms created inevitable conflicts. But gradually the galaxy began to change in ways no one had expected. Cathari crystal technology combined with organic innovation produced medical advances that benefited every species. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as former enemies became partners. Most importantly, children grew up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal and slavery was only a memory. Jake often returned to Cathara Prime to visit the old mining facility where it all began. The caves had been converted into a memorial for all those who died fighting for freedom. Beth Collins had become the planet's governor and was working to heal the scars left by centuries of oppression. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if your ship had not broken down that day?" she asked during one of his visits. Jake looked out at the crystal cities where Cathari and organic beings now worked side by side. "I think someone else would have taken the first step eventually. The galaxy was ready for change. I just happened to be in the right place at the right time, but privately, Jake knew that individual actions mattered more than people realized. One person standing up for what was right could inspire others to do the same. One voice speaking for the powerless could grow into a chorus that changed everything. The galaxy would face new challenges in the years to come. There would be conflicts and setbacks and moments when the ideals of the Confederation would be tested. But Jake had proven that change was possible, even in the most unlikely circumstances. Sometimes one human really could change the fate of an entire galaxy. All it took was the courage to stand up and say that things could be better, that every life had value. That cooperation was stronger than domination. That hope was more powerful than fear. The stars themselves seemed brighter now that they shined on a galaxy where freedom was not just a dream, but a reality for all sentient beings.